Good morning, good afternoon if you're in London, and good morning if you're on the West Coast in the US. The purpose of this podcast is to gather our gang. If you're a gal and you have a child and things aren't working out, we're trying to get you to call in and start putting numbers together to gather our gang. For example, the gal I know who says she's taking about her income is about $2,000 a month. She pays about $1,600 in rent. She only has about $400 left to buy groceries and buy clothes and pay for daycare, and she just can't do it. Okay, daycare costs more than the money she has left. And she's trying to come up with money to pay other people to raise her child, and it doesn't work out. It's not going to work out. In a world of individual rights, it doesn't work out. And the same is true with the guy. You do you make enough money to support a wife and 2.2 children, as they say? You would uh, that you used to be called a male chauvinist pig for saying this, and now the guys who are perfectly willing to come up with a bicycle for the child, you don't come close to making enough money to support a child. That's individual rights. That's as opposed to home economics. Home economics is when the married couple is viewed as a base economic unit. And you have picture a detached house in the 1950s America that was designed intentionally to get you out of poverty. There's poverty, and then there's not poverty, and that's called home economics. That's you have a living room to live in, and a bedroom, and a dining room to eat in, and a kitchen that supports the bedroom, and that's how you get a detached house in the scientific method. And so picture a young couple in that house and go off to the side and start with farming and mining, then manufacturing, then wholesale retail and repair, and then retirement, education, and recreation. And then doctors and lawyers become a kind of lattice that holds it all together. And the Catholic priest is what causes everything to come into being to begin with. This is a religious, this is a God and country thing. It's a Catholic thing. Catholic is holding the other intellectual position. They just they won't even teach it. You don't even realize it. And so we're trying to get you to speak up if you're just an average, to be an average yank and start complaining about this. First, you're a normal, well-adjusted person, and then you're a good mom and you're a normal, well-adjusted person, and that's what makes up the identity of a Yank, the identity of an American Yank, a good citizen. Then it's perhaps race relegated to an endearing quality of your parents and that sort of thing. And then if you choose it, you choose one of the very fundamental professions, or you choose to get married. And so you become a good wife and a good husband. And if you choose one of the very fundamental uh, professions, being a father and a mother, and you choose that as a profession, you take classes in home economics, you learn something about this stuff. And if you're a gal, uh, 10-year-olds can't pay for their mommies. You just have to, if you're going to be a housewife, you have to have a house to live in. And since 10-year-olds can't pay for their mommies, uh, uh, you have a profession. The husband goes out and, but to watch it, the idea of a job, definitions are getting messed up. They throw that around all over the place. And so it clicks in and it becomes the smallest economic thing. It requires you to be a normal, well-adjusted person. So what is God and country? It's in our shop manual version, which is at my level. It's made up of three things: holding Christ's divinity as faith. The Pope holds the moral high ground. The minute I say the Pope is in charge, suddenly I wake up and uh, I become my own man and part of a well-oiled group. Uh, we have two natures, and suddenly I'm adopting that other nature. And there are because of that, there's two things. There's excuse me, there's straightening up my emotions and willing the good of another person. Straightening my emotions up. Both the Catholic and the atheist define mental illness as the normal taken into the abnormal, from a cold to the flu to pneumonia. The the Catholics, the other university professors, they say go backwards, back to the normal, and the normal is normal but not good enough. Sex is the easiest thing to see. If you're a young man, you sit in a chair and you fantasize about the gals, and until there's a chemical change in your body, then you open your eyes, looking around the room, do it again. Only this time you're fantasizing about actually getting her pregnant, and there you go. That's not a natural thing at all. With a snap of a finger, I see what original sin is. It's not a natural thing at all to associate those very strong emotions with getting the gal pregnant. And there you go. The same with fear, and the same with the environment. And you have to be taught this. And so, what takes away your free will? Fear, sex, ignorance, and violence. It's a famous philosophical phrase. And then, willing the other good of a person. You make money by making somebody else better off. You arrange the parameters of a competition so that the guy who puts you in your own business makes more money than the guy who owns his own business. And those two things go together, and you have a yank, an American yank. That's what defined us. That's what made the 1950s America such a great place to live. We had this huge middle class, or they did. They're the heroes. If you arrange the parameters of competition so that there's a large middle class, there'll be a large middle class. If you arrange the parameters of competition so that you breed a breed of normal, well-adjusted people, then you'll have a society of normal, well-adjusted people. And in a shop manual fashion, it's just the way it is. It's a very unnatural thing. And so you have the Pope, you deliberately, in psychology, it goes against your gut. And so you put that, they call it an infusion, that in the top of your psychology, you hold whatever is in the American Army Green Berets, that sense of defending the poor, and you make a big deal out of that. I hate the phrase because it messes up, but God is love and that sort of thing. And so you can just see the 1950s American gal. She associated the physical act of taking care of the kid with the physical pleasures of sex, and then with that romance. And then at the top of that romantic stuff is religion. You'll notice that if you go back on the computer and go back to about the 1970s, early 70s, you'll see the women's liberation movement. You realize that they're the literal opposite of a Catholic nun. And you realize that they didn't discriminate for women or against women, but rather for women who were malicious and against women who were practiced virtues. And terrible things happened. The poor gal who would turn around and go back and ask the kid what he wanted for his birthday, she got plunged into poverty. The other gals, they went straight to the top. It was their choice. They had a solid connection between money and malice. All they had to do was get on to a maintenance level. That's a terribly important thing. They had reached a fork in the road, and all they had to do was choose to say something like this: "Okay, I'll assume that there's a heaven, and I'm going to arrange things to get to heaven after I die. And because of that, I'll maximize benefits and maximize utilities by getting on a maintenance level, by putting other people in their own business, by adopting the leadership quality of washing the feet of the apostles." And they didn't do that. They said, I have a choice, and so I'll change everything, and I'll become the upper class in a peasant to property class society. And what did they do? They threw out God. They separated the act of sex from the act of getting the gal pregnant, and they made money by forcing people to have to work more hours. It's one of the unforgivable sins in the Bible, I'm told, and they couldn't care less. In fact, they have no, look at them, they have no empathy, they have no sympathy. They couldn't care less that other people starved because of these guys. And they did it, and they got away with it. And they got away with it by saying that there is no God. And our courts, they won. This is the long and short of it. You're paying the price for it. And so there's an attitude. Let me remind myself that there's an attitude. There's a person there. I can think of people personally. I use them as a sense of definition. Uh, they'll turn to you and say things like, "Sometimes I just like to act. Sometimes I just like to act like a scoundrel," and they have an emotion that's so difficult to put into words. We couldn't care less about anything. They feel good about it, and they're the ones that said uh, they're going to change society. They're going to uh, get into a duplex and start renting out property to other people. That they're going to be the women's liberation movement. They're going to be the professional tennis players as opposed to professional citizens and professional moms and amateur tennis players. And the long and short of it, they won. And they caused poverty. And give it time, now you're plunged into a world of peasantry. I would never dream of seeing people in the United States uh, being homeless. You walk 1 mile down the road, and there's a whole group of you run into one homeless guy after another. It's a whole group of them. You would never have seen this in 20 years ago. Just to get something else out, excuse me, just so it said, there are two um, Facebook channels, the Priest and the Pimp, and excuse me, Priest and Pimp, and the Priest and the Pimp Media Access dot whatever, or media access. And there's about 3 dozen or so 5 to 10 minute anecdotes that are I'm sure will be helpful to you. So here we're just going to ramble in the good sense of the word and try and get you to start chiming in to gathering our gang. We'll try and be here about 9 o'clock here, excuse me, about 7 o'clock London time, Friday and Saturday, and about 4 o'clock London time, Sunday. And that's about 2 o'clock New York time, and then 11 o'clock on Sunday. And I'm hoping you'll pass the word and start getting people. If that's you and you have a 2-year-old and you're beside yourself because they really don't know who you are, and you have to work on Christmas, and excuse me for rambling, but there's lots of stores open on Christmas that would have never happened in the United States a few decades back when society changed. Society changed for all practical purposes in the 1970s. And the reason is you do all the consuming and they do all excuse me, they do all the consuming. They live in the foothills and do all the consuming. You do all the producing. And so the stores are open. You find yourself the ones working. You're the ones that would celebrate Christmas and would have an appreciation for all this. And they couldn't care less. But they're the ones that take Christmas off, and you don't. And that includes those university professors. The University of Arizona is a short mile behind you, as you said. And those university professors are the ones that changed our society. It was their choice, and there's a welded connection between money and malice. Today it's a little different. You could be a very caring person and in the upper class, and a very caring person and in the peasant class. And so we just have to have a shift of categories. Here we have our little trick. We take a step back and we arrange things back along the classic battle of good and evil. The priest is a good guy, the pimp is a bad guy. The parish priest says, say what you mean what you say, everything else comes from the evil one. And a pimp hustles, cons, manipulates, and intimidates people. And in this world, he's considered the bad guy. That's not the way it is right now. They snuck it in. Most people still think that. How does a pimp recruit a prostitute, by the way? It's a 3-step process. The first step, picture the pimp, and there's 3 or 4 16-year-olds over there. And the first step is to segregate her from her group if he can, and then to keep her from walking in one direction or another. In other words, from the point of view of the gal, he stopped her from walking. She can't move in this direction or another. She can't move in that direction. And he stops her that way. The second stage is to touch her in some fashion. So she goes from here to here. he might shake her hand and then he won't let go. And then he'll say something like this: hey, I'm a real tough guy and I have a temper. And hey, I just don't know what I do when I have a temper. And then he sort of jumps at her and says, right. And now she has to agree with him. And she goes through this instantaneous process. This guy's telling me I better be afraid of him or he's going to kill me. I better act because he can beat the daylights out of me. But I'm not a very good actor, so I better do what actors do and become. I better get into character. And so she becomes, if her attitude changes. And if her attitude changes, that's it. He's got her. The only way she's going to get out of that is some outside, other, very intentional act. A Catholic confession is a good example of that. In other words, he's got her, and now her actions are very determined. That's how a pimp recruits a prostitute. They can really get into this. What's another thing? I have a temper, and I just don't know what I do when I have a temper. You have to put your life on the line just to say the word no to these people. And once you get to the point where you can, assuming that you can beat them up, they're just going to turn their heads from side to side, make karate chops with their hands, and say they only meant it if they could get away with it. If they can't get away with it, they were just joking. And hey, I don't want any problems. What else is true? Find one thing and attack it. You're you're wearing that shirt with those pants. Oh, well, that's it. Just give me $20. And there's another one. It goes on and on. They have quite a list. It all has to do with their emotion. And they hustle. And there's a serious problem with that, isn't there? It works. It's part of the chimpanzee side of us. A human being, his tendency is towards evil. The shop manual way of saying that is we're a sucker for a bum's rush, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can adopt the other nature, assuming you could beat these guys up because it's an act of violence. The other nature is the Catholic nature, the God and country. I'm an American Yank. It's a very deliberate thing. It's actually the most violent position you can take. It goes against your hard wiring. It goes against your psychology, goes against the sociology, it goes against Mother Nature, it even goes against the satanic, the diabolical. That's what the satanic is. The shop manual version of Satan is to hustle, is to manipulate people. Excuse me. And so in a shop manual fashion, there's those three worlds. There's you can look around and you can see people who just naturally are quite scoundrels, but they do it naturally in the sense of the normal taken into the abnormal. And people who hustle, who know how to manipulate and intimidate people, they do it intentionally. They do the same thing as people who are called psychopaths are, but they do it intentionally. And the very base emotions, reasons they act is a little different. But they hustle, and they're either called by society a class of intelligentsia or evil, or a bunch of satanic scoundrels, depending on who's doing the talking. They live in the big house, and you and I live in the slave quarters, and they do all the consuming, we do all the producing. We're hoping, for example, we'll adopt this other nature, this the Catholic nature, the American Yank, and you have to be taught that. You have to be taught this little drill, the priest and the pimp, and the psychology. Once you do, you choose it, and you wonder why you and I will shake and shiver and find it so hard. We'll attack each other when in reality, a lot of times we're just on the same side, and that's it. It goes against our hard wiring. And here we have our little tricks for that. We take a step back, put the priest on one side and the pimp on the other, and we say that people who hustle are inherently the bad guys. And most people will agree with that, and the other guys are called the enemy, actually. And we know that we have to put ourselves through a course in straightening ourselves up. And then we have an attitude, that attitude that that the nuns have, the Catholic nuns, and the attitude of the American Yank, that 1950s gal we're using as such an example. They were heroic. If you're that gal, well, we need you to call in. And look, this is how much money I make, and this is what I need. Once you have to sort of get into character. Actors do that. They'll say the magic if. Don't pretend you're King Lear on a stage, says a book I was going through. Tell yourself, if you're going to act like King Lear on a stage, how would you act? What emotions would you have? And you get into character. And there's a shift. You're consciously getting into character. Maybe someone who's listening to this is an actor or actress, and you might get into the character of being normal and well-adjusted. Years ago, a few decades ago, about 3.5, when I had my little story here and it didn't get very far. That was one of the things that was needed, a course, a 16-week, week 1, day 1, hour 1 course to get you started, to get you to be normal and well-adjusted. That was, I didn't have the education for that, but maybe somebody out there does. And so you're just going to have to pass the word. If you're a gal, you're just going to have to be bossy. Once you get into character, just be bossy. Look, I need a house that's about this big. I need a bedroom that's about 10 by 12 feet that holds 2 children, of this 2 brothers or 2 sisters. I need a backyard that's this big, and this is what I have to have, and this is the budget. What's the grocery budget? What's the clothes? What's the recreation? If you're going to do the consuming, you do. If you're going to do the producing, you do the consuming. So you get out there, and once the kids are in school, you can just daydream, and you picture the gal. It's so difficult to get the kids to first grade. You work incredible hours. And once the kids are in school and you start to have recreation time, it's for you to go play in that silly tennis tournament they have. And that's just that. You have to arrange society intentionally to do that. And you can, it's very doable. They just threw it out. You have to stand up to people who are malicious. And you couldn't stand up to people who were malicious because it was a religious thing. You couldn't shove religion down their throat. And looking back, it just makes you laugh. If you're a guy, you don't ask how much money you make. Ask how many hours do you have to work. And you, in the United States, I think it was something like $12,500 to support a wife and 2.2 children in about 1973. 1973 was the year of the highest standard of living in the United States. The communists in the 1950s said they would overthrow the United States by about the year 1973. Well, it was rather accurate. And that was when there was a profound change in our society. In courts, they came out then and said there'll be no religion in government. And they threw out that argument, those 3 things that make up God and country. And that was one of the Twilight Zone moments. In doing so, they actually institutionalized hustling to the point where, when you realize it, they adopted the stereotypical, straight out of the textbook, classical definition of a satanic church. And it worked. So if you're a guy, you're just going to have to start manning up. If I'm going to work all day long to come across with the family budget and bicycles for the kid and a car, I'm going to make enough money to support a wife and child. That's called home economics. Once more, I'm not going to rent, if I don't rent property to other people, and I'm not going to rent property from other people, and you're going to have to step up to the plate and be rather definite about that. You're going to run into problems. As a matter of fact, you're going to take the most violent position you can possibly take in this world. Christ is an example. Christ was so terribly nice and empathetic, he raised people from the dead. And Christ was such a nasty scoundrel, he thrust people who hustle, con, manipulate, and intimidate people into hell for 44 hours. So he was at one extreme or the other. The communists simply reverse that. They say, hey, you won't fight. And so uh, they take a different opinion. They hold absolutes in the other direction. It's what makes up communism. If you can find an old Baltimore catechism or some such thing and watch television, and during the commercials, take out a piece of paper. And if it says something like, say what you mean, write down its literal opposite of communist doctrine. Well, I've only been doing this for 3 or 4 times now, and I'm hoping someone will hear this and start passing the word. You have to start gathering our gang. This is one time I get to be in charge and get bossy. And the way I'm going to be bossy is by getting you to turn around and start speaking up. You're going to have to start taking charge around here before it's too late. You can do it. And so what's wrong? They threw out God and country. In the United States, the very definition of what defined, the very stuff that defined us. What do I do about it? Well, it's a 4-step process. First step is to publicize a sense of original sin. We have our story, the priest and the pimp, and straightening up our emotions. That's the first step. You and I will start fighting amongst ourselves, and that will undo it. And then it's a straightforward 3-step process. I start to feel sorry for myself here, but I don't know why. Did courts come out in the 1970s and say we decided there would be no religion in government? Yeah. Did they start a peasant and property class society? Yeah. Did they run into the country with tanks and planes? Well, no, but they did throw bombs in the streets, and they would have tore it all down if they didn't get what they want. So they used violence to pull all this stuff. And so step one, you take a step back and go to the society, the Supreme Court, and the judges and these universities, and you would replace them with God and country, with the Apostles' Creed, in a very short manual fashion. And this society would be made up of our citizenry and our how many family units, and then you would just get started. How much farming there is, how many mines do we have, what do we produce? We produce whatever that young couple wants. If you want a couch instead of 2 recliner chairs, then you can see all the farming and mining and all the manufacturing geared toward getting you what you want. The first step, let's see, it's a 3-step process once you get past the initial stage. The first step is to go to the Supreme Court and replace them with judges that say only God and country, and that would end the rest of the government, the establishment. That would be phase 1. Phase 2, you would set the ladder straight. Should you tax the rich or no? You don't tax the rich or not tax the rich. You go back to about 1973 and take the guys that became professional consumers, the ones that got all the golden real estate, instead of putting you and I in our own houses. And I'm sure they'll give up all their rental property as an example, and I'm sure they'll get a garbage sack and go form a class of peasantry beneath the class of peasantry that they caused, right? Right. So the first step, you would go to the Supreme Court, throw the bums out of there, but instead of taking over the place, you find our poor slob of a Perry Mason criminal trial attorney, whether they're the ones that defend the poor and the oppressed, you stick them in there to take care. You don't get yourself a Cuban military hat and cigar and start being a dictator. You find those poor slobs that defend the poor and the oppressed, and you stand up for them. You make sure that they live in a doctor's and lawyer's neighborhood and house, and you make sure they take Wednesdays off, and you make sure that they play in that silly tennis tournament they have every year, and you insist on it. In fact, we go to war against this stuff to fight for this stuff. And the same is true, this stage 2. You take these scoundrels that cashed in on everything. I couldn't care less whether they call themselves Harry the Hippie or Al the Afro or Donna the Feminist, and they go form a class of peasantry beneath the class of peasantry that they caused. And then then you start standing up for the common housewife and the common Joe. The plumber should make enough money to support a wife and child, and so he gets to buy a house, but not plumbers, not the category plumbers, but the category of a Yank who is a plumber. And there you go. And the category of a gal who wants to be a housewife. She's got to have a house to live in, Bob. She's got to be a normal, well-adjusted person. She has to have the house, and she has to have the family budget, and that's just the way it goes. And then the third step, this is where guys like Donald Trump would be in their glory. You picture a 1950s American house, and then you go to work. How many farms are there? How many mines are there? What manufacturing? What do you need to manufacture? Some guys do the producing, do the consuming. You start going to work. You start getting that young couple in that house what they need. And that's how you get a large middle class. So right now, we've been on for a good half hour now. So if you're listening to this, please pass the word and start coming on, joining our gang about 7 o'clock. I've been going by London time, 7 o'clock London time, Friday and Saturday, and 4 o'clock London time on Sunday. You'll have to figure that 2, 2, and 11 in New York time. And then you start speaking up. We have to put numbers into this. I don't make enough money for this or that. How much money do you need? And if you're a young man, how many hours do you have to work to come up with this budget? And so that's it. We hope you'll pass the word and join the gang in the playground. The priest and the pip. Okay, thank you. Good luck to you. And I hope you had a good Christmas, and I hope you have a good New Year.